Welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape Podcast. Hosted by Dr. Holly Krutka, Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. The show highlights SER's role supporting our mission to promote energy-driven economic development for the state of Wyoming.
Welcome back, listeners. Today we're going back to talk about a specific topic related to Wyoming's coal sector. And today we'll be talking to two experts related to our carbon engineering program. So we have had a couple other episodes focused on this topic. One was episode 6, where we described the topic or the carbon engineering program as a whole. And then recently we had episode 35, where we had a Wyoming native, Eli Ellis, talk about his work on pyrolysis, which is a technology to make a char from coal that is used in lots of different products. So today we will be focusing on solvent extraction. So in our carbon engineering program, there's two processes that are being evaluated, pyrolysis and solvent extraction. Today we're going to look at solvent extraction and how to make asphalt from that. So it's a really cool research program, and today we're going to focus on new ways to use Wyoming coal. And for those who aren't familiar with Wyoming coal, basically it's used mostly for power today. We have truly prolific coal seams in the state that could last 1,000 years at current production rates. And it's very, very efficiently mined, partly because of the geology of the seams. They're in some places 50 feet thick, relatively close to the surface. And they also have low ash, low sulfur content, which is great. They're higher in water. So that's just a little primer on Wyoming's coal. And here at the School of Energy Resources and with our partners, we're working on finding new uses for that. So that's going to be our topic today. So we have two folks that are joining us today. So I'm going to ask you both to introduce yourself. Trina, you've been on the podcast before. So remind our listeners of your background and your role here at the School of Energy Resources.
Sure. So I am a chemical engineer by training, and I've got my degree from the Colorado School of Mines. I worked in industry for over 30 years and in basically managing various projects, oil and gas, carbon capture, and actually some biochar projects as well. Started working with SER with the Coal to Products team in 2017, helping vet some technologies that were scalable, commercially viable, and then economically sound as well. I became the director of the Center for Carbon Capture and Conversion in 2022.
Okay, Jeramie Adams, thank you also for being on our podcast. So you're new to the podcast, but you're not new to Wyoming. You're a native, right?
Correct, yeah. Born and raised in Casper, Wyoming, and spent most of my life there and here in Laramie. So
tell us about your journey and your professional role now.
Yeah, so part of my journey really was, being fascinated with science as a kid. And then, going into high school, I had really a fantastic high school chemistry teacher that really just brought things alive and did lots of experiments and really engaged the students. And so at that point, I was really thinking of biology, but I thought, wow, this is really, this is incredible to really create things like this. So I began to study chemistry, went to Casper College. From there, I went to the University of Wyoming to finish my degree, eventually got a PhD and did 4 years of postdoc, worked under a couple different professors. And at that point, I was really wanting to stay in Wyoming because this is kind of a challenge for anybody from Wyoming that gets an advanced degree. And so I was kind of a little bit of a rebel and wanted to see, if I could do everything and find a job and a career here in the state. And after about 4 years of postdoc work, a position opened up at the Western Research Institute. It wasn't in my area of study. It was completely new, so I had to reinvent myself, learning all about heavy oil and asphaltenes and refining processes. And from there, I was able to apply a lot of my chemistry background to transform all kinds of materials into new products and to add value. And so for about the last 5 years, I've been heading the research group, one of the research groups there, which is RenewMat, as the vice president. And there we focus on renewable upcycling, carbon materials, and asphalt technologies.
That's great. And I think that point that you had to reinvent yourself, that happens a lot to all of us.
Absolutely.
So is there anything else you'd like to add about Western Research Institute?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little background. We're a nonprofit, but we've been around in Wyoming for almost 100 years. It started out as a federal laboratory and became defederalized in the 80s when President Reagan defederalized several laboratories. And from that point on, it kind of became its own research entity, really tied to federal money. And from there, it's kind of evolved over time. Now it's basically, we deal with mostly commercial work and commercial projects. We go from the laboratory scale all the way up to pilot scale, looking to commercialize technologies. And we're pretty broad in scope, pretty much anything that deals with hydrocarbons. We're also dealing with some mining, but also a lot of different waste. And these can be things like composites, like wind turbine blades, and even printed circuit boards.
That's great. And I think it's something not everyone realizes around the state, that we have this incredible entity here in Laramie, Western Research Institute. It's been a great partner to us here at the School of Energy Resources. But you really have some very strong research areas of expertise, and one of those is asphalt. So is there anything you can add on how did like a world-class leader in asphalt research come to be located here in Laramie? Or maybe a better way of saying is how did WRI become a world-class leader in research of asphalt?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So as I mentioned, it was started a little more than 100 years ago, or in the early 1900s. They found a lot of high sulfur crudes in Wyoming, crude oils. And at that point, the Department of Interior wanted to establish a petroleum research laboratory. And so that was kicked off here in Laramie. And then from there, that grew and expanded to look at all kinds of different natural resources. So shale oil, coal, natural gas, petroleum. And so asphalt comes from petroleum. It's a petroleum-based product. And so a lot of things that they were understanding about the chemistry of these materials, how to process these materials, and a lot of the physical properties naturally led into asphalt research. And at that point, there wasn't like a national standard for how to use asphalt. You know, what kind of asphalt you'd want to use in different climates and under different traffic loads. And so there became a need for this because roads were failing. There were even some catastrophes and some people died. And so the government stepped in and said, we need to find out how to do this in a standard way so we can have a long-lasting and safe roads. So in the 80s, they initiated the Strategic Highway Research Program. And that was to really develop the specifications we have today, which are called super pave specifications. So WRI was heavily involved with that work. And from there really led all kinds of research on the fundamental properties, understanding asphalt from the chemical level to the physical properties and how it ages, how it falls apart, how you can treat it with additives and improvement, all these things. And there was a very famous chemist, his name was Clayne Peterson, and he's really the father of asphalt chemistry. And many things he discovered, everyone relies on them today. And because of his work, there's the Peterson Asphalt Research Conference. And so this is an annual conference. It's been going now for, this year will actually be the 62nd year of a consecutive asphalt conference here in Laramie, Wyoming. And so we have hundreds of people come from industry, and it's really the only place they can learn about asphalt chemistry.
It's such an interesting story. And I guess a lot of us can take asphalt for granted, but it is because of all that early work and great point that we have to have specifications for asphalt and really everything in our modern lines to keep it safe. So it's a cool story to hear about the leadership that WRI has had and established right here in Laramie, Wyoming. So how do people, if they're interested in learning more about Western Research Institute or WRI, how do they learn more?
Yeah, so the best place is just to start at our website, and it's got a lot of great information. And we will actually be publishing this year a book on our centennial, which kind of covers this broad history back from the federal days and all the different changes to where we are currently.
Great. So let's pivot back to the kind of carbon engineering collaborative project around coal-derived asphalt. But let's start with the basics. So Jeramie, what is asphalt?
Sure. Like you said, it's something we take for granted all the time. We drive on it. 95% of all the roads in the United States use petroleum-based asphalt. And it's a byproduct of the crude oil refining. So the refinery's job is to take out all of the fuel fractions and lubricant fractions and all of these different things. And then in the end, they get something that they can't distill out anymore. And so it's not that all crude oils actually will make an asphalt. Only about 2% of crude oils in the world will make an asphalt. And this is the black sticky stuff, the glue that really holds the road together. So we look at it when it's freshly paved and we see that it's black, but that's only 5% of the road. The rest of it is the rock and mineral filler. It's a very interesting material because it has some flexibility. It's called a viscoelastic material. And so it's not quite a solid. It's not quite a liquid. You think of something like silly putty. It's kind of like that. And we take it so for granted, but it's one of the most complex things that we have on the planet. It's a combination of tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of different molecules.
And I think that's a really important distinguishing point that you made. So when I say asphalt, when most people say asphalt, they're actually talking about like the whole road.
Correct.
But today, when we're talking about that, let's just be clear. The word asphalt in industry, in these research circles, you mean the binder, the sticky stuff that holds everything together.
Correct.
Okay. And you said that's 5% of what we see is like that goes into the road. Okay, perfect. So Trina, we have the carbon engineering program focused on basically anything and everything that we can look at to find new high volume uses of Wyoming coal, and high volume because Wyoming mines are so large, they need high volume to really make an impact. So why asphalt? Where did the idea come from to try to create asphalt or asphalt binder from Wyoming coal?
So that's a great question. Basically, at the beginning of the carbon engineering program, we asked a lot of the basically UW professors what they could do to help us come up with ideas on new uses of coal. And one of the chemical engineering professors, Dave Bell, took some liquid extract from coal and went and talked to WRI and said, hey, do you think you could make anything from this, or asphalt binder? And they said, let me take a look at it, and found out that yes, we actually can do that. So the rest is kind of history as far as where we are now. So
great. And Jeramie, what did you think of? Like, what did you think was a good idea when you first heard that we were interested in working with you all to create asphalt binder from coal?
Well, to be honest,
thought we're a little crazy.
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit of a stretch, just because I had already started some projects and some commercial projects looking at coal molecules and the liquids that can be derived from coal. And I knew right away that the chemistry was completely different. And so my background in heavy oils and petroleum asphalts, I just knew that like it was going to be very difficult. And right away, I knew this was an opportunity because I'm a synthetic chemist, and I knew, like all kinds of strategies to try to improve these different properties that we'd want for an asphalt. So I was excited personally. I saw it as it was going to be a tremendous challenge, and it was going to require quite a bit of chemistry.
So research often starts just with an idea. And so that's where we were. We're like, this is a big use. And I think there's more behind it than that too. Refining capacity in the U.S. has gone down, but asphalt demand has been going up. So there really is a need for alternative feedstocks. And I think in Alberta, they've been looking at heavy oils from tar sands, like alternatives to conventional sources for the feedstock. So we're not different than other areas. We're looking at coal, which is one of the things we're looking for a use for. But it started with that idea. So talk about the process of research and collaboration and how this program grew from an idea into what it is today.
I'm going to start that. Okay, so the WRI side of the project is primarily all about, as Jeramie said, the chemistry and how to manipulate the coal liquids into various binders or various products. And the SER side is taking that information and figuring out how we can make a process to scale up and make it economical. So we work very closely with WRI on the type of solvent we wanted to use when we were extracting. And now we're working on post-processing of the coal liquids into various binder types. The SER side has built a pilot plant capable of about 100 pounds an hour of coal running through the system. And what we are doing is we're allowing, when we make the asphalt binder, if we call it that here, is to allow paving companies and roofing companies have some product to play with and see how it works for them and how we can get them interested in our work.
Okay, I'll just call it asphalt from here on out.
Okay, we'll call it asphalt.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so from our side, this is really a development project. And so it's something very novel. Coal liquids have been used for fuels and all kinds of other applications, but not in asphalt so much, and especially from this method. And so, we would have to try a wide range of ideas, test them out, and begin to look for weaknesses. And sometimes we'd come up with a product, we say, this looks good. Then we dig deeper, and to see, how's it performing? How is it aging? How is it holding up? And then we have to drill down all the way to what is the process going to look like, and what's the economics of that process? And so basically, it's looking at each one of these challenges, whether it was with the chemistry, the performance, the process, the economics, and to just begin tackling those one at a time to see what can be done. And so the collaboration has been great because, UW and SCR, they bring the process engineering, they bring the techno-economic assessment, they bring all these things to really ensure that, we're going to do something that's going to be a commercial success, not just a technical success.
And I think that that's an important point. It's SCR and UW. When you say the SCR side, we're really talking about our folks here on your team, and as well as we've had a lot of collaboration with the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences.
Correct.
And that's where Professor Bell was until he retired.
Yes.
Yeah. And one thing we talk about quite often with some of these research and development projects is the process of innovation. And often when you come up with an idea, you kind of have a theory about how you think something's going to work, or the process to understand if, like what steps am I going to take to see if this works, or to research and understand something better. And often there's a lot of surprises. So the kind of the reason we do research is because we're making educated guesses, but we don't know where things are going to end up. And we often have these like surprises that end up being better sometimes than what you thought was going to happen in the first place. And sometimes they're not better. Sometimes they're worse. So we often talk about surprises in research and innovation, and it's really part of the process. And Jeramie, I'm curious from your perspective, is there anything that has surprised you during this collaborative research process?
Yeah, I've had many surprises, good ones and bad ones. I'll just focus on the good ones.
Oh, great. Yeah.
We started this project in collaboration early on with some really traditional technologies that were well known, and they had real low kind of extraction yields of the coal, and they had certain properties that we really weren't happy with. And so we kind of went back to the drawing board to say, what's going to be economical, what's going to give us the properties we want, and what's going to actually utilize the most of the coal. And we ended up discovering that certain solvents under fairly mild conditions, that they could extract more than 80% of the coal. And so to have a technology that can use so much of the coal, especially Wyoming coal, for me was amazing, because historically, a lot of technologies are quite low in their ability to do that. And also, just to dive in more into the chemistry of Wyoming coal, to see almost how perfectly suited it is to actually apply all kinds of different chemistries. It has a lot of oxygen in it, and normally this is not a good thing, for burning it and BTU value, but we saw this as a tremendous opportunity. And so we began to understand more of, there's all kinds of ways to apply all kinds of different chemistries and get all kinds of different products out of this material. So that was great. The other thing that we discovered was Wyoming coal not being very mature coal like some of the eastern coals. We were always concerned that there may be some of these molecules which can cause cancer, and these are very aromatic molecules. And, we were very early on, we thought, we're going to walk away from this if, we see this in this products that we're making.
Right. Because that could harm workers who are laying it down, as
Absolutely.
well as folks in the processing. Okay.
Yeah. And the world is just becoming more and more sensitive and more stringent about those, especially being in the environment. And so, we were just pleasantly surprised that, there was just so many benefits to using Wyoming coal. And
just to be clear, so you didn't see those?
We did not see those, correct. Yeah, they were in absolute minuscule amounts, just like you would get in a petroleum asphalt. So, and also thinking about this, how can we make this more attractive? It's one thing to do something for Wyoming, but we have to realize that we don't work in a vacuum. We want this, if we're going to have an impact on volumes, we need to make something that's attractive to the rest of the world. And so the rest of the world and the asphalt space is becoming more and more concerned with the carbon footprint and making green materials. And we were able to marry basically bio-based solvents from vegetable oils with the coal to get products that actually work really well as an asphalt. And so this was really just a concept, and it all came together is really amazing. And it's not just that we're using some bio-based solvents. It's actually when we make the product, we marry the chemistry and we have a new product that now stores CO2. So this is pretty amazing in its own right. But one of the things I think was really, really fundamental to all this, which is something that really needs to be communicated to the public in general, is that there's a tremendous green story just by using coal, not doing anything special to it, but just the fact that it is such a vast resource, so easy to get to. It's very low in different things like methane, which is another greenhouse gas. And all of this is known by the Department of Energy because they have studied extensively the different natural resources and compared crude oil to natural gas to coal. And Wyoming is always, since it's such a huge resource, it's always one of the benchmarks. And when we dug into the data, it was just astounding to see that to get it out of the ground, to do the extraction and to transport it somewhere, it has one of the lowest CO2 footprints of almost anything, natural resource wise. And when we benchmarked it against asphalt in the US from the crude sources that make US asphalt, it was 5 to 6 times or even better in the CO2 footprint just to use it as a material. And so many people struggle with this concept. They think, coal is dirty, it makes a lot of CO2. But if you want to use it for material-based applications, it makes sense if you're concerned about your CO2 footprint.
And it's interesting that this could be a potential advantage in markets, which we might need, right? This is this would be a new product entering existing markets. And so if it has this lower greenhouse gas footprint compared to conventional asphalt, that it might help us enter some markets. And I think there's some places that have already started to value that. And it's no different than some of our natural gas producers in the state. Wyoming Gas also has very low methane intensity. And our natural gas producers several of them have leaned into that and have actually accessed some new markets, have had some structured deals. So it's kind of on the early end of these markets. But actually, it's interesting because this even fits in under your surprises, right? Because we just entered this research to find new uses. The lower carbon footprint was something that we realized down the line. But it was one of the surprises that actually might help us access markets and help us get this really launched.
Absolutely. And I just add one more thing there. A few years ago, the GSA actually came out with some policies in the United States.
And what's GSA?
So that's the General Services Administration. So they make some requirements on building materials and construction materials, and also in charge of roadways. And so they basically were telling people on any federal project that they needed to use an asphalt that had the lowest CO2 footprint. So the lowest environmental impact, but that kind of boils down to the CO2 footprint.
Well, we'll see if that stands in the current administration. But in any case, states have also had similar action taken. So for states that have gone down that road, we have a product that we can sell. But we also should be able to compete against conventional asphalt in other states as well. So are there any other advantages that we haven't talked about that coal-derived asphalt might have versus conventional asphalt?
Yeah, so there are quite a few advantages. One is consistency. It's one of the things that the industry really grapples with because crude oil sources change all the time, and so the consistency of asphalt changes. This can have big impacts for road contractors and roadways. The other thing is that since for us this is not a byproduct, we're actually trying to engineer specific properties into the material. So it's completely tunable, or we can tailor make what we want. So, even within the United States, we need different grades in northern climates that are colder because they need to be softer so they don't crack. And in the South, we need stiffer materials so they don't start to form ruts. And we need different materials for a tollway because there's a lot of heavy trucks. And so we can completely make this any way we want. And we've proved this, and we've even scaled up a lot of these products. And we can even make very stiff products for the roofing industry, for roofing shingles. So, all these advantages and the CO2 footprint. And the other thing I'll just throw out, it's a domestic feedstock. So this is something that has, of course, national security implications for us.
Great point. I think the other thing we should mention is that it is an international product. So as we talked about other states and potential advantages of selling in other states, but actually there's potential to export this internationally. Just from the price of asphalt, the price of transportation is doable.
Yeah, so asphalt is actually, it's heavily traded all around the world. There are tankers, vast tankers that send it all around. It's completely mobile. And so especially if you have the right cost properties and the CO2 footprint, there can be a premium in certain markets.
Great. Okay. So I think it's very clear that Western Research Institute has been an incredible partner in this program. They're not our only partner. We also mentioned the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences, but we have another partner, the Wyoming Department of Transportation. Trina, can you talk about how they've contributed to this project?
Yes, sure. So I met Greg Milborn from the Wyoming Department of Transportation a few years ago when he was helping us work on a federally funded grant that was a coal to products type asphalt proposal. And so we met and we talked about this. He's very excited about it. He got a lot of people at the Wyoming Department of Transportation excited about it as well. What they're planning on doing is helping us find a spot in Wyoming somewhere to have a small test section of road that we're going to build, or they're going to help us with, to test our product when we have enough asphalt to pave the road. And I can talk about that in a little bit about how we're doing that.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about where the overall project and the program is today. And the one thing we haven't done, we're like throwing around the word solvent extraction, but we haven't really explained what that is. Like if you're not familiar with the program, so start with where are we today and like what's happening, for example, in our pilot that you already mentioned.
Okay, so the pilot plant that we have at the University of Wyoming is a pilot plant that starts with coal, makes a coal slurry with the solvent that we have, and puts it into a reactor at a certain temperature and pressure and extracts the coal liquids out. And then the coal liquids are then processed downstream. We take a lot of if there's any solids, we filter those out, and then we distill all of the solvent off, and we end up with the coal liquid in a form that we can make for asphalt. So that's how the process works.
That's great. And I think, Jeramie, your point was like most of the coal is going into these like solvent products. There's not that much coming out in other areas.
Correct.
Yeah. And that's really important to us because this program, we're trying to use all the coal, right? We're trying not to like make a bunch of byproduct.
Right. The residue that comes off of the solvent extraction process, it's the solid, and that goes into our other process, our pyrolysis process, and it's used to make char.
Great.
So, yeah.
Okay, so then let's get back. So that's like the process. This was an idea, then we tested pieces of that idea at small scale, working with students and faculty and staff at University of Wyoming. And then when you're saying the University of Wyoming, we have this pilot, you mean here in Laramie?
Here in Laramie.
We have a pilot that's operating. And so now what are the future plans for this work?
So the future plans are, Actually, we're starting this at the end of this month. We are starting detailed engineering for our scaled up plant, field demonstration plant in Gillette. So we're starting that portion of our plant. It's part of our coal refinery that we were talking about before. And the pyrolysis piece of that is being built right now. And the solvent extraction piece is going to be built after we get our detailed engineering done.
And refinery, I mean, it really just means we're taking coal and it goes in and then we're trying to make a bunch of different products through separating it into stuff.
Right. And what we're planning on doing in Gillette, the Gillette field demonstration, is making the intermediate products for the downstream products. So we're making the char and we're making the asphalt that we need.
Great. And this is all happening, the demonstration, both of the pyrolysis system and the solvent extraction, which together make this coal refinery. That's happening at the Wyoming Innovation Center, which is near Gillette.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So Trina, talk about what's next. What are the future plans for this work?
So the plan in the future is we will get the field demonstration plant up and running, and then we will be getting some engineering data from that field demonstration plant to build the first ever coal refinery here in Wyoming. So that's our plan. As I mentioned kind of before, we were planning on having a small test section of road that the Wyoming Department of Transportation is going to be helping us with and show how our product works. The weather in Wyoming is not the greatest, so this is really going to be a great test section there. The estimated time for the coal refinery to be built is 5 to 6 years, so 2031 or so time frame. That's our next future plan.
And we're even working with, so as a university, we can't really take this beyond. This is our last step, is the demonstration. So what we need after that is to work with commercial entities that are going to help us actually have a commercial facility. You know, this demonstration we're building, that's not meant to be a permanent facility. We're going to use it to test it, to optimize the process, to get enough data that we need so we can calculate commercial scale economics. But then we're going to have to work with industry. And we've already seen interest from industry partners on some of the various products. And WRI, of course, from having all these years of expertise, has been really helpful in connecting with potential asphalt users because you are globally known in this space.
That's right. Yep.
So to both of you, Is there anything particularly rewarding about this work and this project?
So what I find really rewarding about this is how I think this asphalt that we're making is going to be for the future. That's what I believe. Whether it's to help mix the petroleum asphalt that they have in order to lower the greenhouse gas emissions, that particular thing, or if it's a standalone asphalt, we have enough coal in the Powder River Basin to pave every road in the U.S. every year for 900 years.
Nice.
So the amount, we will not run out, in other words.
I think one of the other things, coal prices are pretty stable compared to oil and gas prices. And even without the greenhouse gas part, it could be used to blend as refining capacity has gone down. We might just need it to build our roads across the U.S. So there's just like a lot of different opportunities.
Yeah, so that's, to me, is like the most rewarding. It's like we're going to be able to use the Wyoming coal in a way that is unique and new and very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off that last comment. The Asphalt Institute just released a report last month. They'd been working on it for a while with Wood and McKinsey, where they analyzed the situation on asphalt supply globally. And as we know, things are changing. There's the energy transition, there's electrification of vehicles, refining capacity is going down for biofuels, or simply just because the potential danger of remediation of a refinery in the future. And so what they showed is that even if we make some modest progress on the energy transition, that by 2040, there's going to be a significant short supply of asphalt globally. So, what is going to fill that gap? Because basically, as Holly, you mentioned, refining capacity is not going up. And right now, they basically make enough asphalt just to supply the market. So, if that capacity drops any more, there's going to be a shortfall in asphalt supply.
Another risk, even with hydraulic fracturing, the oil production in the U.S. has really changed. And there's less heavy oil, which means we're making less asphalt products at our existing refineries anyway.
Exactly. And the way that we're compensating for that right now is by importing heavy Canadian crude.
Yeah.
And that's where the asphalt portion mainly comes from, because exactly right. All of these light tight oils, they just don't have the heavy ends to make an asphalt.
Great. So even this is something maybe that can help use more U.S. energy for U.S. asphalt, and then also to sell it to everybody else. But yeah, because we're producing different oil than we used to, we're importing, as you said, and so it is a U.S. feedstock, national security feedstock. So
one more thing.
Oh yeah, keep going. But lots of rewarding things.
Yeah, I mean, for me, scientifically, it's been extremely rewarding. But for me personally, being a Wyoming native, my grandfather, he drove the trains from the coal mines to the Dave Johnson power plant for more than 30 years. And he himself had a building on his property that was only for coal storage. And he would load up a couple tons and he burned it all winter long. And this is how he heated his home his entire life. And I grew up around coal, and I often looked at it and thought, that'd be cool to do something with it. And I even did a science fair project once in junior high, but at that time, I didn't have very much knowledge. I didn't know what to do. I basically replicated a little experiment of growing crystals on the coal that I saw in another class. It was pretty lame, So,
no, that is not lame. My gosh.
Taking it to a completely different level, seeing the needs of the state, the needs of the asphalt industry, and even just the environmental needs, and just to think that, that we can actually potentially, hopefully, make a difference and a difference for Wyoming. And the other thing has been really the support from UW and SCR, because this is not a trivial thing. Otherwise, it would have been done long ago. They've done all kinds of investigation of coal and coal to materials and coal to fuels, all kinds of things for many years. And without the support, because we just ran into technical hurdles all along the way, whether it's the process, whether it's the economics, whether it's how the material behaves. And SCR and UW has always been encouraging us and supporting us. And so we've really been able to make a significant difference where, in many programs, you may get a year, maybe two, and then you have to find support a different way. But that's really been rewarding to have that kind of collaboration.
Oh, for us too. I'll say the collaboration is, across the University of Wyoming with Western Research Institute, with the one group we haven't mentioned is Wood Group, which is our EPC firm based out of Sheridan, Wyoming. Well, the office we work with is based out of Sheridan, Wyoming. And then YDOT. We just have so many great collaborators in what might be one of our biggest science projects that is definitely not lame. Neither were your crystals, by the way. But yeah, there's so many positive, no matter like what area you're interested in, if you want to lower greenhouse gases, if you want to focus on national security, if you want to help the Wyoming coal mines, there's really something for everyone in this program.
And I just would like to add that the Wyoming legislature is the people who have funded this.
Exactly.
So through them, we have been able to help.
In the executive branch. That's exactly right. I mean, usually these kind of programs have Department of Energy or Department of Transportation funding. We haven't been successful at getting large scale funding for that, but then the state has really stepped up for us for this program.
Absolutely.
And we really appreciate that and appreciate them having the long vision that we can support you all at WRI because, without their support, we can't do anything. So that's Absolutely. A great shout out there. Yep. So how can folks, if they want to learn more, learn about this work?
So from our perspective for UWSER and our pilot plant and then our field demonstration plant, we have our website that you can go to, and then you can also reach out to me or anyone else on the team, and we can tell you all about it. So that's what
we're happy
to
talk about it.
Anytime.
Yeah.
And if you're a glutton for punishment, there are a couple technical documents filed as patents. So if you wanted to get in the ugly weeds, maybe.
Yeah, that's true.
How does someone find those?
So they're searchable even if you go onto Google or the U.S. Patent Office. And if you start, there's some keywords that you need to have to find those, but they're available. They're published.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you both so much for all your collaboration and for talking about all this. It's just so exciting to see how far this program and this specific technology has just moved in the last few years. The fact that we're going to be we're doing engineering now at the demonstration scale, and there's going to be more challenges, but I really feel like we have a strong team and we have world-class expertise at WRI and here at SER. So I think we're going to tackle those. So for our last question, it's a little different. We'll move away from technology, and we always like to celebrate what a great place Wyoming is, not just for energy technology collaboration, but just to be. So our last question we like to ask listeners, what's your favorite place to visit in Wyoming? And Trina, I think you have had this question already, but maybe you have a different answer this time.
Yes, I do. So I recently went to Saratoga, and now it is my new favorite place.
And it's pretty epic.
Yes,
love
it's
Saratoga.
Awesome. Yep.
Okay, what about you, Jeramie?
I love the rivers and the creeks. I love fishing, walking up and down in the nature. I love the mountains. It's just so beautiful. One of my favorite places is the Cloud Peak Wilderness area up in the Bighorns. And I just had one quick thing to share because it's kind of unique. Growing up here, I had some family that owned a rock shop, and we would go rock hunting. And so we would actually go kind of with all the old rock hounds and all their vehicles with some campers, some tents, and kind of circle up out in the plains somewhere. And then we'd head out. And so there's a place called Eden Valley where you can go find like petrified wood and things like this. And so just to be on the plains, because most people just drive through and like, there's nothing out there, that looks terrible. But actually to spend time out there, to camp out there, to walk around and just see the beauty of the plains, that's a perspective that I don't think most people will ever get to have or appreciate.
Well said. Okay, thank you both so much for all you do, for leading this program, and for doing this podcast.
All right. Thank you, Holly,
for having us.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast that highlights the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. You can expect a new episode of Energy Frontier every Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.